Where in the world are you watching this from and what time is it? Subscribe now because this story won't just entertain you. It might haunt you. I never thought it would come to this. My hands trembled, the walls of the courtroom echoing with silence, save for the taunting words of his lawyer. She has no proof he cheated. My heart didn't race, but something inside me twisted. A calm, cruel wave of bitterness. It was the kind of bitterness that grows in the shadows, quiet and sharp. For years I had lived with it, hidden it. I stayed quiet though I wanted to scream, to throw everything I had at him. The world, or at least the few people in that cold, sterile courtroom, watched me, waiting for something. Waiting for me to break, to show weakness. I wasn't going to give them that. I wasn't going to let him have that. But then my son, my sweet, innocent boy, the one whose face still held traces of the child he used to be before the world started breaking him down, handed me something. It wasn't much, just a phone. A little black device, hidden in his backpack, like a secret he wasn't supposed to share. But he had. He had carried it with him for weeks, never telling me why, never speaking about it. Until now. He didn't say anything as I looked at the recordings, but I felt it. I knew. His silent betrayal. A child's rebellion against a world that had made him grow up too fast. The phone recordings, evidence, proof, they weren't what I expected. They weren't what I ever wanted to hear. But they were the truth. And that truth, it stilled everything. It silenced the entire room. My heart seemed to stop as I played the recordings aloud. The lawyer's smirk vanished. The eyes of the jury, the judge, the witnesses, they all turned. All of them. They all saw the truth I had carried in silence for so long. That moment when the whole room was forced to listen was the moment I knew I had crossed a line. And though it was the first step toward justice, it felt more like the first step into something darker. Something more dangerous. Because nothing ever feels truly settled. Not for me. Not for him. Not after everything we've been through. The years of disappointment, the endless fight to prove myself, to be seen, to be understood. I always did everything to hold it together, to be the strong one, the one who carried the weight of our broken home on my shoulders. It wasn't just my marriage that had broken. It was everything. My mother, always so distant, always so controlled, never once telling me she saw the pain in my eyes, never once saying she understood what it felt like to live under the shadow of someone else's mistakes. My father, long gone, never here to offer guidance, never here to help me make sense of the wreckage. I grew up alone in a way I could never truly explain, trying to fill the empty spaces with what I thought was love, only to watch it all fall apart. I'd given him everything, my heart, my trust, my years, and he had betrayed me. And now, in the cold light of the courtroom, all I could do was sit there, numb, as my son handed me the only thing that mattered. Proof. But even then, it wasn't enough to fix everything. The hole in my chest, the emptiness, the gnawing guilt for ever believing in him. It didn't go away. The silence between us grew even thicker, even colder. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just about the cheating. No, it was about everything else that had been unsaid for so long. Everything that had been buried beneath the surface. What was he hiding? What did he know that I didn't? As I stood up to leave, the room still buzzed with whispers. The lawyer's eyes met mine, his expression shifting into something darker. I felt a chill, not just in my body but deep in my bones. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. I couldn't breathe. As I left the courtroom, the world felt distorted, like I was walking through someone else's nightmare. The people around me, the cold marble floors beneath my feet, the echoing voices. Everything felt so far away. It was all a blur and I couldn't focus. My son walked quietly beside me, his small hand clutching mine with a strength that didn't belong to someone his age. He was only 11, yet in that moment he was the one keeping me together. And still I felt it. The weight of everything we just uncovered pressing down on me like 1,000 pounds. His voice, the voice I had once known as the innocent sound of a child, now had a certain emptiness to it. A burdened tone, as if he too knew the darkness that was lurking. The truth wasn't just in those recordings. It was in the silence that followed. In the things unsaid. I couldn't stop hearing the lawyer's mocking laugh in my head. She has no proof. The words spun around me, chasing me, gnawing at the edge of my mind. But it wasn't the lawyer I was angry at. It was him. My husband. The man who once promised me forever. The man I had given everything to, my love, my trust, my soul. I always thought he was the one to blame, that it was his betrayal that hurt me, but now I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about anything. I walked through the hallway, the walls of the courthouse pressing in on me, and I saw her. My mother. She stood in the doorway of the waiting room, looking at me with those familiar, unreadable eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I could feel the weight of her gaze, the disappointment that seemed to radiate off of her. I could feel it like 1,000 needles in my skin. I never felt her love the way I needed it. I always felt like I had to earn it. I always felt like I was never enough. As a little girl, I tried so hard to make her proud, to be perfect in her eyes, but it was never enough. She would tell me I was strong, that I could handle anything, but I never felt like I could. I never felt like I had anyone to turn to. And now, standing here in this moment, I couldn't help but wonder, was she proud of me now? Or was I just another disappointment, another mistake in her life that she couldn't fix? The weight of it all was suffocating. I couldn't escape the thoughts that kept crashing into my mind. I thought I was the victim here, but what if I had been blind? What if everything I thought I knew about myself, about my marriage, about my family, what if it was all a lie? The thought twisted in my gut like a snake. I kept thinking about the man I had once loved, the man I thought I knew. Was I just fooling myself all along? Was I blind to the signs? My heart began to race and the panic set in. My mind spiraled. I couldn't control it. What if I had missed something? What if I had been too caught up in my own pain to see the truth? The truth that I had been living a lie. I thought about the years we spent together, the moments we shared, the promises made. I remembered the nights when he would hold me, and I would rest my head on his chest, thinking that we were untouchable. But now all I could hear were the words from that phone. All I could see were the secrets he kept hidden from me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. And yet, in some twisted way, I couldn't bring myself to hate him completely. Was that because I was still in love with him? Or was it because deep down I was afraid of the truth? I didn't have time to answer that question because my thoughts were interrupted by a text. A message from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, cryptic, just a string of words that made my stomach drop. You've been lied to. Check his things. You'll find the truth. My hand shook as I stared at the screen, feeling my heart pound in my chest. It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. But something inside me screamed that I had to find out. The weight of the unknown was eating away at me, and I couldn't escape it. I had to know what he had been hiding. So I drove home in a daze, the roads blurring as I moved through them on autopilot. When I reached our house, everything felt wrong. The silence inside was oppressive. I could hear the sound of my own breath, ragged and uneven, as I stepped inside. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I started searching anyway. Through drawers, the closet, the desk, everywhere. And then I found it. It wasn't much. A small unmarked envelope tucked away in the back of a drawer. I opened it slowly, as if I was afraid of what I might find. Inside was a letter, faded with age. A letter addressed to him. To my husband. The words blurred in front of my eyes, but as I read them, a chill ran down my spine. They weren't from me. They weren't from anyone I knew. They were from someone else. Someone who had been in his life long before me. The letter spoke of love, of promises, of a future that didn't include me. It spoke of things I didn't understand, of a past I had never known. And suddenly I felt the ground shift beneath me. I had been living in a house built on lies. But the worst part, I didn't even know who the man beside me truly was. This wasn't just about his betrayal anymore. This was about mine. The things I had missed. The things I hadn't seen. And as I stood there holding that letter in my hand, I realized the truth. I had no idea who I was anymore. I had no idea what was real. All I had were the lies. And I was drowning in them. I stood there in the silence of our home, staring at the letter in my hands, and for the first time, I felt something crack deep inside me. It was like the last wall I had built around myself shattered, piece by piece, and I could hear the deafening sound of everything breaking apart. I didn't know what I was holding anymore. The truth, a lie, or just another layer of deception wrapped in words. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep playing the role of the unsuspecting wife, the loyal partner. I had spent years constructing a life, a future, a family, only to realize that it was all a facade, built on secrets and unspoken betrayals. The truth didn't just hit me in that moment. It consumed me like wildfire, spreading across everything I thought I knew. My hands shook as I folded the letter, tucking it into my pocket, but my mind was already racing. I wasn't just a victim anymore. No, that woman, the one who had cried herself to sleep, the one who had begged for answers, the one who had held on to hope for too long, she was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone colder. Someone more dangerous. I didn't want to feel weak anymore. I didn't want to be the one begging for crumbs of affection, for scraps of truth. No, I was done with that. As the days passed, I started to change. Slowly, like the steady buildup of a storm, I began to keep my emotions in check. I didn't let anyone see me crack. I didn't let anyone see how much it hurt. Not my son. Not my mother. Not even him. I became someone else entirely, someone who could control the game. I didn't let my heart bleed anymore. It was just strategy. I learned to smile, to play the part, to blend into the background and wait for the right moment. I kept my eyes on everything. Every little detail, every movement, every word. Nothing escaped me anymore. My world had become one of precision, and I wasn't about to let anyone slip past me again. The lies began to unravel more and more each day. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way my mother looked at me when I asked her if she knew anything about the letter. Her silence spoke volumes, and in that silence I knew. She had known. She had always known. The secrets she kept hidden, the things she never said. They weren't just about me. They were about him too. About my father. About everything. My whole life I had been living in a lie, and she had been a part of it. Maybe she wasn't the one who lied directly, but she knew, and that was enough to tear everything apart. She hadn't been the supportive mother I had always wanted. She had been complicit in the same cold, calculating world I had found myself trapped in. But there was something else, something darker, something I had overlooked until now. I had been blind. I thought I was the only one in pain, the only one carrying the weight of betrayal. But what if the people around me had their own secrets? What if they had been playing their own games while I was too caught up in mine? My best friend Lisa had always been there for me. I had always leaned on her, trusted her with my thoughts, my fears. But lately I had started to notice the little things. The way she seemed too calm when I told her about the recordings. The way she avoided looking me in the eye when I asked her what she thought of my husband's behavior. I had thought she was my rock, my anchor. But what if she had been hiding something too? What if she knew more than she let on? It was only a matter of time before the pieces started to fit together, and I was no longer sure who I could trust. I had to find out. I had to know everything. And that meant confronting the people I had once thought I could rely on. I waited for the right moment. One night, while my son was asleep in his room, I confronted Lisa. I didn't give her a chance to deny anything. I didn't give her a chance to explain herself. I just asked her plain and simple, "Did you know?" She looked at me, her eyes wide, and I saw the hesitation there. For a moment I thought she might lie. I thought she might try to tell me I was imagining things, that I was overreacting. But then she broke. Her face crumpled, and in that moment I realized she had been hiding something all along. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me what?" I pressed, the anger rising in my chest. "What didn't you know how to tell me?" Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, unlocking it and showing me a message. It was from my husband. He had sent it to her weeks before everything came to light. "I love you," the message read. "You and I will make it through this. I promise." My breath caught in my throat. The truth was darker than I could have ever imagined. Not only had he betrayed me, he had been with her too. And she had known. She had been a part of it. The rage inside me burned hot, and I could feel it taking over, consuming me. It wasn't just about my husband anymore. It wasn't just about Lisa. It was about everything. I had been living in a world full of lies, full of manipulation and deceit, and I wasn't going to let it continue. I wasn't going to let them win. I stood up, my body trembling with anger, and I turned to leave. But just as I reached the door, something stopped me. A noise. A sound I hadn't heard before. A voice. "You think you know everything," my mother said, stepping out from the shadows. "But you have no idea what you're really up against." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you mean? I asked, my voice shaking with both fear and fury. I mean, you're just beginning to see the truth, she said, her voice cold. But it's not over. Not by a long shot. And in that moment I knew she was right. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. About taking back what had been stolen from me. And that's when I stopped being afraid. I stood there, the cold weight of my mother's words echoing in my mind, but I didn't feel afraid anymore. The storm inside me had reached its peak, and now there was only the aftermath of everything I had been through, the quiet before the final act. Revenge wasn't just about hurting those who had wronged me. No, it had become something else entirely. It was about reclaiming my own identity, about proving to myself that I could survive this, that I could break free from their lies, from the twisted version of myself they had crafted. I knew what I had to do now, and as I walked away from my mother, the realization hit me harder than anything before. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to expose every last one of them, tear their world apart the way they had torn mine. One by one, I would dismantle the life they had built, and they wouldn't even see it coming. I made my move with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment for years, though I had never known it. First, Lisa. She had been my confidant, my friend, the one who had promised to always have my back, but in the end she was just another player in this sick game. When I confronted her again, there was no more pretending. I knew everything now, the texts, the phone calls, the meetings that had taken place behind my back. She couldn't deny it. She couldn't hide behind fake apologies anymore. She had betrayed me just like everyone else. I didn't want it to be like this, she said, her eyes brimming with guilt, but I didn't care. The truth didn't matter anymore. You should have thought about that before you chose your side, I said, my voice colder than I ever thought I could sound. I watched as she crumbled, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I had no room for sympathy. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a fighter. I watched her leave broken, and in that moment I felt a strange sense of closure. But I wasn't done. Next was him, the one who had started it all. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with. But now I knew the truth. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He was a stranger, a monster in disguise. When I finally confronted him, there was no emotion left in me. Just a cold, calculated resolve. How long? I asked him, the question hanging in the air between us. How long had you been lying to me? He couldn't look me in the eye. Not this time. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his voice shaky, but it was too late. The damage was already done. You did, I replied, my tone flat, devoid of any feeling. And then I told him everything. About Lisa, about the betrayals, about the lies that had kept us trapped for so long. His face paled as he realized I had known everything. He begged for forgiveness, but I didn't care. I didn't need his apology. I needed something more than that. I needed him to understand the gravity of what he had done, the destruction he had caused. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I wasn't even looking for justice. I wanted control. And in that moment I had it. The final blow didn't come in the form of words, but of action. I took everything he had built, everything he had worked for, and I tore it down. His reputation, his empire, his life. It all crumbled before him. He was powerless to stop it. I watched as he lost everything in front of his eyes. And as I walked away, I realized that I had become something else. Someone else. I wasn't the woman who had begged for love anymore. I was the one who gave it, and I had learned to take it all back. But even as I stood there, victorious in my revenge, there was something nagging at me. Something that didn't sit right. I had won, yes. I had done what I needed to do. But in the process, I had lost pieces of myself I could never get back. I had become so focused on the pain they had caused me, on the need for retribution, that I had lost sight of who I used to be. And in that moment of reflection, the final twist of the story hit me harder than anything before. I had thought I was the one who was betrayed, the one who had been blindsided. But there was one thing I hadn't known. One person who had been playing the game from the very beginning. My mother. The woman who had always been there, who had given me advice, who had seemed to understand. She wasn't just a passive player. She had orchestrated this all along. It was her in the shadows pulling the strings. She had known about everything. About him, about Lisa, about my life. She had allowed it to happen, and I had been too blind to see it. The woman who I had once thought was my rock had been the architect of my destruction. And as I stood there in the quiet aftermath of everything I had done, I realized that the world I had once known, the life I had fought to protect, was nothing more than a series of carefully placed lies. Everything I had believed in had been a performance, a facade. I didn't know who I was anymore or who I had become. The revenge, the power, the destruction, it hadn't fixed anything. It had only left me empty, hollow, and broken in ways I hadn't expected. I found myself standing at the edge of the rooftop, looking down at the city below. It was a perfect night, the stars twinkling above, the wind softly tugging at my hair. For a moment everything felt still, like time had stopped just for me. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool air, and let it out slowly, watching as my breath vanished into the darkness. This wasn't a victory. Not really. This wasn't closure. It was just the beginning of something else. Something darker. Something I didn't have the power to stop. And if you stayed this long, you already know this wasn't just a story. This was a warning. Subscribe. And remember me.